This is Scorched Vine and Vin Noir's production of Hope's Nocturne. Chapter 7, Hope's Dish Served Cold. Written by OPL Noir. Performed by Carrie Storm. 13 minutes into the second half, and his team was already on the back foot. They'd taken a 10-minute break at halftime, and things went downhill from there. Coach flashed a yellow card against the other side, so they were headed for the first scrum of the game. They were 15 points down. Manos hoped to use the opportunity to tighten the score. He knew he had to push for every yard that could be gained, as well as position the ball to their advantage. "It's getting too cold for this," Manos complained, squinting against the afternoon sun as he glared over his shoulder at Peter. "I don't remember it being this cold yesterday." "Well, my malodorous buddy, it's finally happened," Peter remarked as they jogged toward their position on the back line. "What?" Manos wondered as he scowled at his friend. Glancing back at Peter, he sniffed his armpits. "I washed last night. I had to borrow Marie's deodorant this morning, but that's beside the point." He cringed at the sweet-smelling lavender scent seeping from his armpits. Manos had been feeling proud of himself today. That was, until now. He'd not only washed his clothes last night, but ironed them too. With his share of the money they'd gotten from Mr. Prescott, he'd been able to purchase a few things for his gran, as well as cleats for today's game. So far today, he'd managed to go through half the game without causing a single injury. He was on a roll, and actually smiled without feeling bad about it. "Score 15 points for not bloodying my opponents." Manos mentally high-fived himself. "Now, if I can just get 3 consecutive tries at grounding the footy over their line," he thought. He had been eyeing the distance to their opponent's goal line when something occurred to him. "Maybe that's what's needed," he concluded, in response to the nagging question his uncle posed. How did they persevere? Continue to put one foot in front of the other when there was no hope? Manos looked up as he thought he'd found the answer. That man and his nagging questions. He shook his head, still angry with his uncle. But maybe, when every day is dark and hope seems to be sleeping, maybe victory is won by inches. Perhaps their triumph, won through perseverance, was achieved one glimmer of sunshine at a time, one glimpse of hope at a time. "Your blood's thinning. Now you're going to get cold like the rest of us mortals. And for the record, we're gladiators. We play in all kinds of weather, without complaining." Peter chuckled, slapping his puffed-up chest. "And no more running around with your shirt off, young man," he finished with a snicker. "As if I could in the first place." Manos winced, thinking of his gran. "Look up, small beginnings. Your answers aren't written in the sand." Manos smiled as he remembered his uncle's words. So he looked up, pausing to admire the intense blue of the sky, almost bordering on indigo. In October, Canakal's sky was a grayish haze, punctuated by the occasional pale blue, highlighting the steel gray of their mountains and the deep green evergreens covering them. In Azotonis, however, where they were currently attending school, the light was brighter, showcasing a riot of colors. Everywhere, from the azure sky to the blazing autumn color-streaked mountains, to the carpet of butterscotch yellow black-eyed Susans covering the field below, life marched on. "Despise not the day of small beginnings," Manos said, mumbling the entire quote to himself. While he would concede that nothing much had changed, after all, he still needed a permanent solution to his financial problems. Today, he felt lighter. Today, they had more than enough, and he would not despise that. Peter gave him a shoulder check as he caught up. "There's your boy," he said, gesturing towards the half-fly with his chin. "You talked to him yet?" Connecting a face with the name, Manos shook his head in disgust. He recognized the stocky sixth former. The menace played against them in the previous day's game and had been one of the forwards who had been free-wielding with his elbows. The rules of the game and the spirit of sportsmanship were tossed to the wind. Of course, when the ref just turned a blind eye, it didn't matter. "So, It didn't come as a surprise that he was behind the detestable acts against Amanda. Today, the creep was decked out in full Rebarian Academy black and gold, with a number 10 jersey. Not for the first time today, Manaus wondered. I thought the coach said that they weren't picking positions until next month. Young Henry had to be 18. Sporting a full 5 o'clock shadow. He had sunken blue eyes and dark hair, gelled back to within an inch of its life. He also looked about 10 pounds and 3 inches taller than Manaus. Not your typical fly half. Doesn't look like he's built for speed. Manaus thought, then shrugged. Not my decision. As Henry rallied their side to the position on the field, Manaus reminded himself that he'd turned over a new leaf. His mother had warned him that he couldn't settle every disagreement with his fists. He should use his words. And judging from the young man's intense demeanor during their game, maybe he just went a little overboard. He should give him the benefit of the doubt. He would try reason. Manaus slowed his pace to a brisk walk, using his sleeve and shoulder to wipe sweat from his brow. A cool breeze swept across the pitch, much like it had last night as they walked to the van, causing his legs and bicep muscles to twitch. Or was it rage, as he considered this 6'4" fly half facing off against his young friend, recalling the conversation he had last night. Wow, for a minute there, I thought we'd have to come to your rescue, Jock teased as they left the Prescott's abode after delivering Amanda. Dude, did you see that? See what? Peter asked, frantically fishing for the keys in his pocket. It had gotten dark, and they'd parked in the alley. Jock turned to scowl at Peter. Old man Prescott was reaching for him, he explained, gesturing toward Manaus. Manaus shrugged. He wasn't bothered by it. It seemed obvious. The man was caught up in a memory, briefly unaware of where he was and to whom he was actually talking. If he were being honest with himself, which he never would be in front of these guys, regardless of how much he cared for them, the man's memories of his mother gave him a glimpse of her that he'd never appreciated before. He knew she was beautiful, but to see her through someone else's eyes had warmed a part of him that had become lost in his grief. Don't worry, dude. We had your back, David reassured, hugging his shoulder as a cold wind blew through the alley. But just in case, how fast can those chubby legs run again? He asked, and the others burst into laughter. You're not funny, Manaus protested, shaking his head, although he'd been laughing too. As they all settled into the van, Peter asked, how weird was that? Mr. P carried a torch for your mom. At the same time, Jock turned to scowl at him. Dude, if your hair had a little red in it, don't even finish that. Manaus threatened as the others laughed. Now, which one of you is going to tell me what's going on between Amanda and this young Henry? It started years ago. Peter sighed as they drove off. With the sixth formers greeting the newbies, the first formers at the door on the first day of school. It's always been innocent. They would give them the rundown on how their lives would change. They would let them know there would be no excuses. Homework had to be done on time. No one was holding their hands anymore. It was time to grow up. Jock chimed in, chuckling as he sounded nostalgic. You know, scare the crap out of them, he explained. He wouldn't understand. Manaus started in the 5th form. He didn't experience it, Peter pointed out. That's right. Jock smacked his forehead. How could I have forgotten? Manaus was born old and getting older every day. Peter finished, and David laughed. Did you notice how Amanda was looking up at him? Total hero worship. Jock answered between hiccups. So neither of you are funny, Manaus complained. What does this have to do with Henry? Jock sighed. Anyway, it was a rite of passage for the newbies, he said, cutting into their laughter. The 6th formers would also let them know where they could find help if they needed it. They would take them around, show them where the library and the cafeteria were, so they wouldn't starve by the end of the week. They'd take them aside and impart any wisdom they'd gained over their 6 years at the school, including shortcuts. That was a holdover from the days when the academy had been a military installation. Peter explained. The mood in the van had become somber and quiet, except for the hum of the engine and the occasional bang from a pothole. It turned into a rite of passage for the sixth formers too, one that was sanctioned by the trustees and the admin. There would be some yelling, some of the newbies looked shell-shocked. David, who had been quiet until now, chimed in. Someone inevitably had the uniform wrong, though. I warned you, Peter said. He did. Jock laughed. Everything worked like that for decades, Peter explained, shaking his head. Until young Henry. Yes, Jock sighed. Until him, he agreed. Then both fell silent, as if considering what all that meant. This year, they did more than yell, David continued, breaking the silence. This has been Chapter 7, Part 1 of Hope's Nocturne. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode and invite you to join us for next week's final chapter and episode of Hope's Nocturne. Until then, if you so wish, you could purchase the book at Barnes & Noble or Amazon online. Thank you.